And welcome back to another episode of Coup Save America. I'm your host, Sean Sainhart. And today we're going to be diving into a subject that is very fascinating. I want to begin in the 21st century. The geopolitical landscape is dominated by a complex and tense relationship between the United States and, of course, China. Both nations, representing two distinct visions of governance, economic power, and global influence, find themselves increasingly at odds. This conflict, which touches on trade, technology, military strategy, human rights, and environmental policy, is more than just a bilateral rivalry. It's a microcosm of the larger struggle for global leadership and power. To understand the intricacies of this tense relationship, one must dig deeper into the historical context, analyze current developments, and consider the broader implications for the future of global order. The rivalry between the United States and China did not, of course, begin overnight. In the aftermath of World War II, China was a nation devastated by civil war and foreign invasion. The rise of Mao Zedong and the Communist Party in 1949 marked the beginning of China's transformation into a so-called socialist state, an event that, of course, alarmed the United States, which had emerged from the war as a capitalist superpower. The ideological divide was clear. The U.S. was championing so-called liberal democracy and free market capitalism, while China embraced a Marxist-Leninist framework. During the Cold War, China was aligned with the Soviet Union, posing a dual threat to U.S. interest. However, the split from the Soviet Union in the 1960s created a prime opportunity for the United States to engage China in a new geopolitical strategy, one that culminated in President Richard Nixon's historic visit to Beijing in 1972. This marked the beginning of China's reintegration into the global economy, as Deng Xiaoping's reforms in the 1980s opened China to foreign investment and international trade, laying the groundwork for its economic ascent. By the early 2000s, China had become a central player in the global economy, leveraging its low-cost manufacturing and vast labor force to become the world's factory. But with economic success came the ambition for greater political and military influence, leading to an inevitable clash with the United States, which had long enjoyed unchallenged global dominance. The most visible aspect of U.S.-China rivalry has been economic, with trade being the front line of this battle. The election of Donald J. Trump in 2016 brought the issue to the forefront, as the Trump administration launched a full-scale trade war against China, accusing it of unfair trade practices, currency manipulation, and intellectual property theft. Quote, China has been taking advantage of the United States for many years, end quote, Trump said in 2018. We have lost hundreds of billions of dollars a year to China with no end in sight. It's time to fight back. The imposition of tariffs on Chinese goods was one of Trump's most prominent policies, sparking a tit-for-tat escalation as China responded with its own tariffs on U.S. products. While the Phase 1 trade deal signed in January 2020 temporarily halted the escalation, underlying tensions remained unresolved. According to the Peterson Institute for International Economics, the tariffs cost U.S. consumers and businesses approximately $57 billion annually, while China's economic growth slowed as they were forced to reduce exports to the United States. Beyond trade, the technological competition between the two nations has become even more pronounced. The United States has, of course, accused China of attempting to dominate critical technologies such as 5G, artificial intelligence, and quantum computing. Hawaii, the Chinese telecom giant, became a central figure in this conflict, with the U.S. government accusing it of facilitating Chinese espionage and posing a national security threat. In response, the United States imposed sanctions, banning American companies from supplying the firm with essential components. We are in a technology race with China, and we must maintain our leadership in innovation, said U.S. Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross in 2019. China's technological ambitions, if left unchecked, will pose a significant threat to our security and global stability. Meanwhile, China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, represents a significant push to expand its influence through infrastructure investment in developing countries. While framed as a global development strategy, many in Washington view the BRI as an effort to create a Sino-centric economic order, that undermines U.S. influence, particularly in Africa, Central Asia, and Southeast Asia. But economic and technical rivalries are only part of the story. The U.S.-China relationship is also defined by growing military tensions, especially in the Indo-Pacific region. China's military modernization and assertiveness in territorial disputes, especially in the South China Sea, have alarmed the United States and our regional allies. The South China Sea is a critical waterway through which about 1/3 of global maritime trade passes. China claims nearly 90% of the sea based on what it calls the 9-dash line, a demarcation line that has been widely rejected by the international community. In 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague ruled against China's claim in a case brought by the Philippines. However, China dismissed the ruling as it has continued to militarize artificial islands in the region, deploying missile systems and constructing military-grade airstrips. The United States has, of course, responded to this with a policy of freedom of navigation operations, sending warships and aircraft through the South China Sea to challenge Chinese claims. In a speech at the Hudson Institute in 2020, then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo made the U.S. position clear. He said, "We will not allow China to treat the South China Sea as its maritime empire." The military buildup in the Indo-Pacific region has led to concerns about the potential for a direct military confrontation. According to the U.S. Department of Defense's 2021 report on Chinese military power, China has rapidly expanded its naval capabilities, boasting the world's largest navy by number of ships. Additionally, China's development of anti-access area denial capabilities is designed to prevent the U.S. military from operating freely in the region. China's aggression is also apparent in its recent confrontations with Taiwan. The U.S. maintains a policy of strategic ambiguity toward Taiwan, meaning it does not implicitly guarantee military intervention in the event of Chinese invasion. However, arms sales to Taiwan and U.S. naval patrols in the Taiwan Strait have sparked outrage in Beijing. In response, China has ramped up its military exercises near Taiwan, flying record numbers of aircraft into Taiwan's air defense identification zone and conducting live-fire drills off the coast. Some analysts, such as Elbridge Colby, a former Pentagon official, have warned that the risk of war over Taiwan is increasing, particularly as China's military capabilities grow and the balance of power in the region shifts. In an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal, Colby argued, "If the United States does not take bold action to counter China's ambitions in the Indo-Pacific, Taiwan may fall, and the U.S. will face a severe strategic defeat." The U.S.-China rivalry is not solely about economics and military strategy. It is also, let's be honest, a clash of values. The United States, despite its own imperfections, presents itself as a defender of democracy, and excuse me as I laugh at that, human rights, and the rule of law. China, on the other hand, follows an authoritarian model, where the Communist Party maintains strict control over political and social life. The Chinese government's treatment of ethnic minorities, particularly the Uyghur Muslim population in Xinjiang, has drawn widespread condemnation. According to a 2020 report by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, more than 1 million Uyghurs are believed to have been detained in re-education camps, where they are subjected to forced labor, indoctrination, and severe human rights abuses. The United States, in response, has imposed sanctions on Chinese officials and companies involved in these abuses, with then Secretary of State Antony Blinken labeling China's actions as genocide. Too bad he doesn't take that same approach when it comes to Israel. China, for its part, rejects any foreign criticism of its domestic policies as interference in its sovereignty. Chinese officials have constantly portrayed U.S. accusations of human rights abuse as a pretext for undermining China's rise. The United States uses human rights as a political weapon, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Hai Zhang said in 2021. Their true aim is to contain China's development and maintain their global hegemony. Hong Kong has also been a flashpoint in the U.S.-China clash over values. The 2019 pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong sparked a controversial extradition bill, drew international attention. The U.S. Congress passed the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, which threatened sanctions on Chinese and Hong Kong officials responsible for cracking down on protesters. In response, China passed a national security law, which effectively ended the one country, two systems arrangement and suppressed the pro-democracy movement. The implementation of national security law in Hong Kong has had far-reaching effects. Dozens of activists and opposition figures have been arrested under the broad terms of the law, which criminalizes activities that China deems as secession, subversion, terrorism, or collusion with foreign forces. Jimmy Lai, a prominent media mogul and pro-democracy advocate, was sentenced to prison, signaling Beijing's intolerance for dissent. The U.S. government condemned the law and its enforcement, with Blinken declaring in 2021, "We stand with the people of Hong Kong and their aspirations for freedom and autonomy, which were promised to them under the international agreements." While trade, technology, military posturing, and human rights dominate headlines, an often underlooked yet critical battleground in the U.S.-China relations is environmental and climate policy. Now, both nations are the world's largest polluters, with China accounting for nearly 28% of global carbon emissions, followed by the United States at around 15%. And this is according to data from the Union of Concerned Scientists. The climate crisis is one area where cooperation between two global superpowers is, of course, essential, as any global efforts to mitigate climate change will require active participation from both countries. In 2015, during the Obama administration, the U.S. and China played a pivotal role in securing the Paris Agreement, with both nations pledging significant reductions in carbon emissions. This cooperation was seen as a rare positive aspect of U.S.-China relations. However, the Trump administration's withdrawal from the Paris Agreement in 2017, combined with China's continued construction of coal plants domestically and through its Belt and Road Initiative, has, of course, hindered progress. President Joe Biden's decision to rejoin the Paris Agreement in 2021 and his commitment to aggressive climate action has reopened the possibility for renewed cooperation on environmental issues. During the April 2021 Leader Summit on Climate, Xi Jinping pledged that China would, quote, strive to peak carbon dioxide emissions before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060, end quote. While these commitments are significant, questions remain about the implementation of such policies, especially given China's reliance on coal as a primary energy source. China's role in financing coal projects abroad through its Belt and Road Initiative has been a point of contention with environmental advocates. Despite Xi Jinping's announcement that China would no longer fund coal projects overseas, many environmentalists remain skeptical about whether the pledge will lead to a meaningful action. Li Shou, a senior climate policy advisor for Greenpeace East Asia, noted, quote, China's overseas coal investments have been significant in contributing to the global climate crisis. We need more than promises. We need concrete steps to shift towards renewable energy. The Biden administration has sought to frame climate policy as a national security issue, recognizing the destabilizing effects that climate change can have on economics, migration patterns, and resource conflicts. John Kerry, the U.S. Special Envoy for Climate, has stated, quote, climate change is a global challenge that requires global cooperation. If China and the U.S. cannot work together on this, the entire world will suffer. The strained relationship between the United States and China extends beyond bilateral realm and into the international system at large. Both countries are, of course, vying for influence in multilateral institutions, global governance, and international norms. While the United States has long been the dominant power in organizations like the United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund, China is seeking to reshape global governance in its image. In 2021, Chinese President Xi Jinping promoted the concept of, quote, community with a shared future for mankind, end quote, emphasizing a multilateralism and rejecting what he called unilateralism, a veiled criticism of the United States. China has increased its contributions to international organizations, positioning itself as a champion of global development through initiatives like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and the Belt and Road Initiative. However, the United States and its allies view China's growing influence in global governance as a challenge to the liberal international order established after World War II. They worry that China's authoritarian model could gain legitimacy and erode the values of democracy, human rights, and free markets that have long underpinned the global system. The pandemic has added another layer of complexity to the United States-China tensions. The outbreak of COVID-19 in Wuhan in late 2019 and the subsequent handling of the pandemic by both countries have exacerbated their geopolitical rivalry. The U.S. government, particularly during the Trump administration, accused China of concealing the virus's origins and failing to provide transparent information, contributing to the global spread of COVID-19. Trump repeatedly referred to the COVID-19 pandemic as the global China and the Wuhan virus, stoking xenophobic rhetoric and further straining diplomatic ties. Now, the Biden administration has taken a more measured approach, but has continued to press for a comprehensive investigation into the origins of the virus. In a 2021 intelligence report, U.S. agencies could not conclusively determine whether the virus arose from a laboratory accident or natural transmission. China has repeatedly denied the lab leak theory and rejected calls for further investigations, instead promoting conspiracy theories that the virus originated in the United States or Europe. The geopolitical ramifications of the pandemic are still unfolding, but the mutual distrust it has engendered between the United States and China is likely to persist. The World Health Organization's credibility has also been undermined, with both sides accusing the organization of bias. For China, the pandemic has been an opportunity to showcase its ability to manage a global crisis and provide assistance to developing countries, while the U.S. has struggled with domestic political polarization and its own COVID-19 response. As the United States and China continue to navigate their tense relationship, the future at this point remains uncertain. Will the two countries find ways to cooperate in critical global issues such as climate change, pandemics, and nuclear nonproliferation? Or will the rivalry escalate into open conflict, whether economic, technological, or perhaps even militarily? Former U.S. Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson warned in 2020 that a full decoupling of the U.S. and Chinese economies would be disastrous for both nations and for the world. Yet both sides appear committed to strengthening their strategic positions, with neither willing to back down on core issues. In the words of President Xi Jinping, we must not shy away from competition, but competition should be fair, and it should not harm the interest of either side. This measured tone reflects China's recognition that while it seeks to challenge U.S. dominance, a total breakdown of relations would be economically and politically damaging. On the other hand, American officials and defense analysts are increasingly concerned about the prospect of conflict, especially in the Indo-Pacific. The Pentagon's 2022 National Defense Strategy prioritizes China as the pacing challenge, indicating that the U.S. military is focusing on preparing for a possible confrontation with Beijing, which would, of course, be utterly disastrous. The U.S.-China rivalry is set to define global politics for decades to come, and the outcome of this rivalry will shape the international order in ways we cannot fully comprehend. Whether through conflict, cooperation, or an uneasy balance of both, the relationship between these two superpowers will determine the course of the 21st century. To summarize the situation, the rivalry between the United States and China transcends the mere competition between two powerful nations. It represents a clash of ideologies, economic models, and visions for the future of global governance. While there are areas of potential cooperation, such as climate change and global health, the tensions between these two countries are likely to persist for the foreseeable future. Each side views the other as a threat to its values, interests, and long-term security. For the United States, maintaining its leadership in global affairs while managing a rising China will require a delicate balance of diplomacy, economic engagement, and military preparedness. For China, the challenge lies in asserting its influence without provoking outright confrontation with the United States and its allies. As we look to the future, the stakes of this geopolitical rivalry are monumental. The decisions made by both Washington and Beijing in the coming years will shape not only the relationship between these two superpowers, but also the trajectory of the entire international system. The world watches, and history unfolds in real time. And that, my friends, is the final word up front. Today, we are rejoined by our good friend, Toufic Sarieddine. You may recall that when Toufic came on our show in 2022 to tell us about the Belt and Road Initiative and to talk about Israeli-Palestine relations. Well, it's definitely time for an update. So Toufic is back to promote the book he has written about China's relationship with Pakistan and to share further viewpoints on the conflict in the Middle East. I think there have been some developments in that area since we last spoke with Toufic, and there's been some developments today that we're going to get to as well. All this is coming up right after the break. Welcome back. Toufic Sarieddine is a Lebanese PhD graduate from Nagoya University. His research focuses on the hegemonic impact of China's Belt and Road Initiative on U.S. hegemony around the developing world, and his articles have appeared in the Journal of World Systems Analysis, Middle East Critique, The Diplomat, Geopolitical Monitor, and The Geopolitics. Toufic has a forthcoming book titled A Tale of Rice and Copper, a world systems analysis of the China-Pakistan economic corridor. And finally, we are done with the reading. I'm having a hard time today, folks, so please bear with me. And with that, I would like to bring in Toufic.
Hello.
Hello. Sorry if I got your name incorrect. I have a speech impediment that really makes it difficult to pronounce names. So I apologize.
No, it's okay. It's all right. You did a good enough job.
While I have you here, I want to dive right into the Israeli terrorist attack that occurred earlier this morning. At least 9 dead, 2,800 injured after apparently pagers exploded across Lebanon.
Yes.
And this is just another escalation of tensions between Israel and the Middle East. And I just was wondering about your perspective on this.
Well, it's not surprising, really, when you've seen what you've seen going on in Gaza. They have no disregard for civilian life. I want to be clear that the attacks seem to have been targeted against Hezbollah. People wonder why Hezbollah exists, or if they're terrorists or whatever. And in Lebanon, Lebanon would be Gaza if we did not have Hezbollah. That's what many people believe, especially their staunchest supporters. I want to remind people that during the Lebanese civil war, Israel encroached on Lebanon's sovereignty from the south. It ate up half the country. The whole world told it to leave. The US, Saudi Arabia diplomatically asked it to leave. It would not leave. What kicked it out effectively and definitively was Hezbollah. And this is why I believe the Arab world is collectively cynical of any kind of United Nations resolutions in this regard, any kind of resolutions in the International Criminal Courts. We've just seen how the Western established institutions do not really do anything about Israel. And so this is why I think that human rights and civil liberties in the Middle East have not flourished as they would have otherwise. So this is an issue that does touch upon every single aspect of life here. It's not just about Zionism or who was here first. No, it's about, women's rights, other civil liberties, so on and so forth. So it's just a part of our everyday life. I'm here now visiting, and I'm leaving tomorrow. And my mom and sister were in the heart of the city when these explosions happened.
Oh,
so
geez.
it was really close to home this time. And I can only imagine what other people have endured.
Yeah, I mean, 2,800 people have been injured, at least 9 people dead. And it looks like this was a supply chain issue where Israel might have somehow interceded these pagers before they were delivered. Of course, the other possibility is a cyber attack that targeted the lithium batteries somehow. I mean, Israel has outright stated it wants to expand its war objectives into Lebanon.
Yeah, I mean, it has a blank American check to do
Yes,
whatever it wants, pretty much.
and and
You're all
and
paying for it. Like, it's
yeah,
ridiculous. People ask me, "Oh, why don't you move to the States?" You know, we here in Lebanon, our most prestigious universities are all American universities. I'm a graduate, for example, of the American University of Beirut. It's credited in New York, in the city of New York. So we're kind of fashioned to eventually go to the West, join the West. The reason I refused to move to America is because my taxes would go to this. You know what I mean? It would go
yes.
to the forces that are pushing me out of it. So I'd be a hypocrite to want to do that. With all due respect.
No, hey,
Um,
believe me, I have the same issues as you do on this. I am furious. Again, as you said, Israel seems to have a blank check when it comes to doing whatever the hell it wants to throughout the world. And um, I mean, this has been going on for 50 plus years since Israel was created.
yeah, it's very Orwellian. I think it is the most Orwellian thing in existence today. Um, that such a state is backed by the West, which is all about, you know, pop music and
Yeah,
liberty and love and whatever. The cultural tentacle of US hegemony is a seductive, tranquilizing force, but Israel always loudly interrupts this trance that we are under, those of us in the Middle East who speak English. You know, this is very cultural as well. It's not just political. It makes us question our values and stuff. So it really cuts deep. You know, you're in, maybe you haven't seen this, but on Instagram, Palestinians in Gaza are making like 10-second videos asking for donations. They've had to edit catchy videos to just put themselves in it when people are hooked. We've gotten to this point in humanity where like people are begging on Instagram for dear life and actually hoping that their videos don't get shut down because Meta, as you know, under Zuckerberg, has been hostile towards pro Palestine content, even from
yeah.
screaming mothers, even from fathers holding up decapitated children. Um, it's quite Orwellian. And yeah, I mean, what else? What else can we talk about this that hasn't been said already?
Well, it's just infuriating to me that our politicians, I mean, we have to also talk about APAC and the influence
Yeah.
it has on US politicians. I mean,
Mhm.
they essentially control US Congress at this point. And until we do something about that, I don't see any policy changes coming, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think
Um,
it's a very clever business scheme.
oh,
It's
yeah.
just, you know, you invest in the form of a bribe to a
Yeah.
few congressmen. They pass a bill that funds you tenfold on your investment, and the cycle just keeps going on and on. The problem is that even those who you would think have some integrity have been quite stubborn about not supporting Palestinians. Tim Walz, for example, who has been painted
Yes.
as this friendly dad next door who, you know, sheds tears at speeches that are heartfelt and who just want to hug, refused to entertain any Palestinian pleas from those who would have been supporters, I suppose. I don't think it's because he himself is a bad person. I think it's because he understands the game very well. Nobody wants to be the next um, person voted out due to a rival that is super heavily funded by pro-Zionist lobbies. And this is the game that you're stuck in America right now. And if you say something about it, your opponent will look at you with a cold stare and will just recite lines fed to them just to make money and stay in power. People are afraid sometimes of AI. Oh, what if AI controls us? I think that AI has already controlled us. If we are this inhumane now and this brazen now and able to say lies with such serenity and tranquility, then AI really has nothing to shock us with anymore. If you look at the State Department's defenses of Israel's actions, it really is a masterclass in not giving a damn and doing so calmly. Reporters go ask questions, and the responses are always very, very, very diplomatic. Oh, we'll let Israel investigate this. We still don't know what happened to the World Kitchen staff explosion. There's been no updates on that case because Israel's taking its sweet time
Yeah.
investigating it. What is it doing? Will it really do it? Does it really have a functioning system? You know,
Israel lies about everything. I mean, you can't trust a word that they say.
yeah. But if you say that, you're anti-Semitic. That's the
Oh,
problem.
I know. I've been called anti-Semitic many times, and I don't care.
It's ridiculous. Like, so, I'm a Semite. I'm an Arab. Semite is a actually linguistic category that is separate from race. So if some Polish guy whose grandfather converted to Judaism doesn't suddenly turn from Caucasian to Semitic, that's not how it works. If you look at, for example, actually, here's a fun fact that you may not be aware of. In Israel, it's forbidden to undertake DNA testing to find out where your ancestors are from. It's illegal. What did Netanyahu's son do? He did this test and he posted it on Twitter, of all places. And it showed that he's 95% Caucasian of Russian and Polish heritage or origin. So, what claim do you have to this part of the world? You know what I mean? And people think that Arabs are anti-Jew. We're not anti-Jew. Historically, we've been way, way, way more hospitable to Jews than Christians have. There wasn't a Moroccan Inquisition or an Egyptian Inquisition or a Yemeni Inquisition. There was a Spanish Inquisition, a Catholic Spanish Inquisition. And that's to say nothing about the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. It wasn't an Iraqi ghetto uprising or a Syrian ghetto uprising or a Lebanon or a Palestine ghetto uprising. It was a Warsaw Ghetto Uprising in Poland, in North Europe, in North Central Europe. So we're not anti-Semitic. We're not anti-Jew at all. We have streets in Lebanon that imply, Jews living there. You know what I mean? And we in schools here aren't taught about Judaism. We're not taught to be pro or against it, or pro-Jews or anti-Jews. We're just taught like math and science and that and stuff like that. So Israel does its own impeccable job at making us hate it. And and we always know that it's the government's fault, not necessarily the people's fault. But from what I've seen on Instagram and social media is that you have some vile people living there who like really are racist towards Arabs, and that needs to be checked in the Ministry of Education.
No, I would agree with that 100%. And you look at it's funny because I mention that to people all the time, that Arabs are Semitic as well. And it seems as though there is a clear bias in Israel. And again, I realize this is not a sum game here. I mean, this is not I don't intend this for everybody in Israel, but there's a vast majority of people in Israel that are anti-Arab. It seems as though that they get off on killing Muslims.
Yeah, and if you look at their textbooks, a lot of their maps show Israel proper as including parts of Iraq and Syria and Saudi Arabia and even parts of Lebanon. So they're taught to like maybe feel entitled to the whole area. And this is all funded by US money. I mean, Israel has no particular it's not like a powerhouse of industry to speak of. It gets massive subsidies from the US to the tune of over $30 billion a year. I mean, a squirrel would invest that and double the money somehow. So it's not that hard to and they say, oh, it's the only democracy in the Middle East. No, it's not. No, it's not. There's monarchies, but we're not all monarchies. And democracies that don't function are not functioning because the US bribes them to not function.
Yes.
For example, Egypt. Egypt is a democracy. It has a Congress. It has democratic processes, but its current president Abdel Fattah al-Sisi was handpicked by the U.S. and Egypt receives military aid from the U.S. I think it's in the top 5 recipients of military aid in the U.S. to keep things the way they are and to kind of be Israel's diaper, so to speak.
Yeah.
Whenever something bad happens, Egypt is the nanny that goes and tries to make things better. Not better for the Palestinians and generally, but just like returns to the oppressive status quo without the bloodshed. So Egypt, through because of its dysfunctional democracy that is aided and abetted by the U.S., who claims to be all for democracy,
Right.
you know what I mean, feeds into this whole idea that the Middle East is not democratic. No, I mean, we cannot be democratic when Israel exists because it would have been wiped off ages ago. Because if you survey the public, all of us are overwhelmingly anti-Israel, all of us. But our governments, as you have seen, are a lot more cautious and arguably cowardly about this, except the ones that have been taken over by military coups. So, like Yemen, for example, and of course the militias here and there. And the militias themselves are problematic. You know, they're extremely problematic. They're not like these ultimate, flawless heroes by far. And I could sit and criticize Hezbollah and the Houthis for hours and hours and days. But Israel, when Israel reemerges, we remember why they're there. They're there to satisfy a need. They're there to channel our rage. And they're there, practically speaking, to keep our land intact, because otherwise Israel would encroach. And can I curse on this podcast or not?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, you know good goddamn well that if Israel were to annex southern Lebanon, the U.S. State Department would be like, oh, we're looking into the situation and we will follow up with it as necessary. There'll be no massive action on the ground. No one's going to come to save us. France won't, Germany won't, the UK won't, the US won't. We really have to look out for ourselves. And this is where Hezbollah comes in. I'm not like a staunch supporter by far, but once again, I understand why they're there and I understand why they're not going to go away. This whole attack on them is just an escalation. You don't publicly attack an armed militia and expect them to just back down like some beaten dog. You can't do that because they have an audience, they have a base, and they also have a religious obligation in and of themselves. So this is just an escalation. It's an escalatory maneuver to like keep the fireworks on, to keep the money coming in, to keep Netanyahu in power, to make people afraid of the response from Hezbollah and keep him in power. Hezbollah and Netanyahu really are they kind of benefit from each other in some way, because they scare the other's audience. They scare the other's base, and the other's base keeps supporting them. You know what I mean? Netanyahu scares the Lebanese with attacks like these, and Hezbollah is propped up. Hezbollah scares the Israelis with the drones and rhetoric, and Israelis prop Netanyahu up. So they both feed each other. So it's ultimately, I think, a war of who has the most effective weaponry and who has the plain guts to see it through, because we've seen Israel being armed to the teeth, and we've seen Hamas with much less sophisticated weapons going up to the tanks and attaching bombs to the tanks. So that's something to be said about grit and oppression and what you have to do to get out of it. Harriet Tubman comes to mind.
Yeah, no, I mean that's what is so striking to me is that you October 7th was a horrible attack. I don't dispute that. But what do we expect Palestinians to do given the stark oppression and the military oppression that Israel has rained down upon them? I mean, we expect them not to fight back.
Yeah, just to break it down for people who may not be familiar with the oppression, pasta was banned from Gaza until John Kerry visited somewhere in the 2010s.
Really?
Pasta. Yes, pasta for lasagna, for spaghetti, for your fettuccine alfredo. It was banned from Gaza by Israel. Israel will not allow Gaza to import it. Israel controls what Gaza imports. It calculates the calories that it thinks
Yes.
Gaza needs, and lets them import accordingly. It demarcates for fishermen where they can and cannot fish in their own coastal waters, because Gaza is on the Mediterranean, as you know. It doesn't let them fish that far deep into the ocean, even though that's where most of the fish can be. It is immiserating this population to get them to either die or leave or switch allegiances somehow, which is sadly what happened to the son of one of Hamas's very prominent leaders. Quite a lyrical, um, prolific, profound thing. One of Israel's best informants was revealed to be the son of a Hamas militant who saw that Hamas was being too extreme, and so he just switched to the Israeli side. And it's a whole other conversation in of itself, but it just shows you the psychological depths and psychological abyss that these things occur in.
Absolutely.
Just the other day on a podcast called Two Nice Jewish Boys, one person smirked. It was like, if you gave me a button to just erase every living thing in Gaza, I'd click that in a second. Like, what do you say to that? Like, if any Arab said that, even in like, oh my goodness, I wouldn't be alive right now. You know what I mean? I'd have my visa revoked. I'd have everything, all kinds of sanctions slapped on me. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. These double standards. So yeah, yeah.
What do you think Hezbollah is going to do in response to the attack today?
That's such a good question. So to give you an idea of Lebanon's geography and rent, Lebanon went through an economic collapse recently, so things have been rough. But they have gotten better and better because well, not to toot our own horn, but we are resilient. Okay, we're resilient. We're educated. We have also a very large diaspora abroad of wealthier Lebanese in the Gulf, in Africa, in Latin America, who send remittances and invest to prop up the country. On this visit here, I can tell you I had an excellent time. The food was fantastic. The clubs were fantastic. The electricity goes out. Yes, it goes out. What can you do? But otherwise, it was fantastic. Lebanon's in constant decay and rebirth, and in constant disarray and reorganization. It's just tumultuous and it goes with the flow. Um, the south of Lebanon is where most of Lebanon's Shia population live. As you know, in Islam, there are two major sects, Sunni and Shia. Hezbollah is mostly Shia, although it has many sympathizers who are Christian, because Christians also live in Lebanon's south. They've also been victims of Israeli oppression. And so you have many Christians who swear by Hezbollah and who shelter them if they need to be sheltered. So it's not a Christian versus Muslim thing. It's simply a colonizer versus a resistor thing.
Right.
So because of Israel's recent attacks on Hezbollah and, well, the interchange of arms, I'm not gonna paint Hezbollah as a victim. The interchange of arms and firing, a lot of the Shia from the south have had to move, have had to leave their houses, and find apartments elsewhere in the country. Mind you, we still have over 1 million Syrian refugees in the country. The country is small; it's barely over 10,000 square kilometers, and so those who have seen these attacks happen want to see a response by Hezbollah. They want to be avenged. At the same time, Hezbollah has to be wary about not implicating all of Lebanon into this war. So far, if you've noticed, the Lebanese army has not batted an eyelash throughout this entire affair. Even though Israel is attacking Lebanese land, the army has not interfered, because there's a tacit understanding that this is purely between Hezbollah and the Israeli state. It's not between the Lebanese state and the Israeli state. Um, so Hezbollah's base will be looking for revenge, but those of us who are not from the south don't want things to get worse for the rest of us. So we're
Right.
kind of hoping Hezbollah does not implicate the rest of us and keeps attacking from like the areas that have been more or less deserted. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's very like it challenges your solidarity. It really challenges your solidarity as a fellow Lebanese. And unfortunately, we've had instances of homeowners or people who own property raising rents when the Shia from the south want to seek refuge and pay rent there astronomically. Some of these people do so because they see that Hezbollah has had a detrimental impact on the country. It had a hand to play in our economic collapse. Therefore, it aided the theft of our deposits from the banks. Therefore, if anyone's going to pay for the economic damage, it should be Hezbollah and its base. So there's that kind of retribution thing going on. But Hezbollah must respond. It absolutely must. This attack breaks so many red lines,
Yeah.
and I'm leaving the country tomorrow, and I'm going to be quite nervous about what's going to happen. But I do think that it will be similar to previous responses, as you know. Hezbollah commander was killed. It
Mm-hmm.
was assassinated in Beirut earlier, like last month or the month before, and the response came, I think, 2 to 3 weeks afterward, a barrage of drones and missiles. Some of them did damage, some of them didn't. It's disputed whether or not it was effective, but that was the kind of response that I think will happen. Yeah, but for better or for worse.
Yeah, but it seems as though any response is just going to, I mean, Israel wants a response, right? I mean, Israel wants to be able to move into Lebanon.
Yeah, it would love that, and I'm sure many of the Zionists would love that as well. Sweet, sweet land where Jesus walked, or
Yeah.
whatever. But if it encroaches on land, then that is, I think, the Lebanese army's red line. And the Lebanese army, mind you, is also funded by the U.S. It receives like
Really?
about yes, it receives military assistance as well. Because for all of its flaws, the U.S. I think is into statecraft. It wants Lebanon to have strong state institutions so that eventually the state can overpower Hezbollah and rein them in. So far, we don't have a strong state that is able to rein Hezbollah in. And so they're able to do their thing, for better or for worse. So the US has deeply invested in trying to build state institutions, not only for the army's sake, but also for the sake of providing services to all Lebanese and not leaving room for Hezbollah to go in and do so, and therefore fortify their presence and increase their popularity. You may not know this, but in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood capitalized on the state's ineptitude in providing services to the rural population in Egypt. It went and it provided these services itself, and in so doing, it created popularity for itself and legions of followers for generations to come. So that's a tactic that is also a part of the dynamic.
It just seems as though that the state, the Lebanese state, because as you said, if it wasn't for Hezbollah, Israel would just have its way with Lebanon.
Absolutely. I think so.
So why isn't the Lebanese army getting more involved in this? I mean, these are terrorist attacks happening in this country.
Yes.
And it seems though the state needs to respond as well.
Well, it depends who you ask. Some people would say because there are elements within the Lebanese state, so namely members of the Lebanese parliament and the army, who are secretly in cahoots with the US and don't want to ruffle the US's feathers.
Right.
They also want a Lebanon that is free of Hezbollah for many reasons. One of them is to do what the US tells it to do. The other is, which I think is a legitimate one, is that if you get rid of Hezbollah, you'll have a much more attractive state for investment and prosperity and growth, economic growth.
Right.
Um, so there's people who believe that as well. Why hasn't so? Yeah, those are the two main. Well, the other reason is that if the army were to attack, then Israel would have free reign to attack all over Lebanon, and it would be justifiable because so far they've attacked quote unquote majority Shia sites. They haven't attacked any Christian sites or Sunni sites for that matter. Or Druze sites. Druze are a very important part of this country as well. I'm a Druze myself. You may not know this. You may not even know what Druze is. I could talk about it briefly if you want.
Yeah, what is a Druze?
So a Druze is a sect, a religious sect that resides in the Levant region. We have our own belief systems, and we're usually very chill. We're associated with Islam, but some of us say no, we're not associated with Islam. We're quite secretive. We believe in reincarnation. That's our biggest thing. When we also believe that you cannot convert to a Druze, you must be born a Druze, and that you must marry someone who is a Druze to keep, like, I don't know, something intact. And there are Druze in the Israeli army, and Druze in the Lebanese army, and Druze who are pro-Hezbollah, and Druze who are anti-Hezbollah. So we're all over the place. And actually, one of the recent attacks by Hezbollah was framed to be on a group of Druze in occupied Golan, in the occupied Golan Heights of Syria. And the Druze leaders of Lebanon were quick to say that no, this was not an attack on the Druze because we have good relations with everyone and blah 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 blah. So going back to your question, if the army were to attack, then this is the whole Lebanese people attacking, and so this makes the whole Lebanese people a target, and that would be way more disastrous, according to some.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very complicated situation. Let me ask you this. How has Hezbollah's role in Lebanon evolved over the last few years, especially after the 2019 revolution?
Oh, goodness. They lost popularity so much because they were seen as the main suppressors of the revolution. We wanted a revolution that would bring about a less corrupt state. Our system is extremely corrupt. It almost feels like the government is fighting us. The government is an obstacle to our prosperity. If you want to open a business or set up, like there's an area in the south where if you want to open up a business, the wife of a prominent political figure will go over with her lawyer and make you sign papers to concede 50% of that establishment to her.
What?
So yes. I can't name names because it might get me in trouble, but this exists. You can look it up. And it was a huge part of the revolution is attitudes like that. Also, here's another one for you. The Minister of Energy, who was responsible for Lebanon getting 24/7 electricity and failed to do so, despite 10 years in office and despite billions of dollars in investment, he is kind of a partner of Hezbollah. He's Christian. He's a partner of Hezbollah. I think he's demented. He had his goons go around his town and force people to switch off their generators, which people need because there's no electricity. So they have private generators. He had them go switch them off in the middle of the summer during COVID because the sound was annoying him. Yeah. It's like psychopathy 101. And this person, however, unfortunately, was a partner of Hezbollah. So Hezbollah, for even its staunchest supporters cannot defend this alliance. So let me just tell your viewers, Lebanon is run, Lebanon's president must be Christian. This is in our constitution. Lebanon's president, it's a sectarian country. Lebanon's president must always be Christian. Therefore, Hezbollah tries to partner with Christians who are okay with it, having free reign in the country, as long as they get the perks of corruption in return. So Hezbollah effectively partnered with a thief This man is a thief. He's actually targeted by the Magnitsky Act. That's a good thing that the U.S. did, thankfully, uh, and um, and we all hate him. He's reviled in the country. His name is Gibran Bassil. Gibran Bassil. Um, he's done many horrible things. His father-in-law was our president during this 2019 revolution, and his father-in-law mocks the people openly. He says, "Oh, these Lebanese idiots will never do anything, will never be able to do anything." Like, he actively hates his people. And he said that because he knows that if push comes to shove, Hezbollah will just go and attack. And that's exactly what happened. I have a friend who is from Dahi, which is the area that is very associated with Hezbollah. He just held up a sign that says, "No to corruption." That's all he did. And Hezbollah's goons went over and we're like, oh, there's no corruption in Lebanon. Put that sign down. Put that sign down. That's fundamentally unfair.
Yeah.
It's unfair. And so it's very hard to have sympathy and support Hezbollah until October 7. October 7 replenished its popularity coffers. It is now more popular than ever, I would say.
Really?
Every single day in Gaza. Yes, absolutely. Whatever disdain that I once had for Hezbollah has now become like a distant memory, because I see that they are necessary. They're necessary. I mean, you cannot, if they did not exist, Lebanon South would be northern Israel. That's it, point blank. Because the US is unable to rein it in. There's no power that can rein it in except the Israeli people's conscience. And what I'm seeing is that they don't have much of that at all. If you just go on a podcast and say you'll erase all of Gaza for some like prime beach real estate, you don't care about me whether I live or die. You don't. For you, I'm just occupying the land of your alleged ancestors, even though I am a direct descendant of those who did not convert but are related to you, or you wished you were related to you, but you're actually Polish, so you're not. Blondie. Go back to Poland.
Now, Israel has not, of course, commented on the attack today.
I'm sure it's rejoicing, but also the government is rejoicing, the people are bracing. Like, they're just putting their people in danger at this point. Like, why did you do this? What do you benefit? Do you really think Hezbollah will cower away? These are jihadis. They want to die in the name of attacking the enemy. If anything, you're just going to get them riled up and excited to attack again. So this is a strategy purely for Netanyahu to rile up popularity, and to lower these protests that have been crippling Israel in any case. The people have also reached a tipping point there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the protests are outrageous, calling for Netanyahu's ouster.
Yeah, he's not going to go anywhere. He's stubborn and heartless, and just if you give a bad person a blank paycheck, the world will be a worse place. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If you give a racist a blank check, I'm sure that the race he doesn't like will have it worse off a few years down the line. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's what he has. He's effectively invincible. No one can tell him what to do. If you notice, Germany has been absolutely impotent. It's crippled with guilt because of the Holocaust. So according to German logic, maybe 6 million of us have to die for Germany to change its mind. That is ridiculous, and it has no place in the civilized world post United Nations and post Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. So it's ridiculous. Also, I live in Japan. Here's a tidbit for your audience. Every year, the city of Nagasaki hosts a memorial for the victims of the nuclear bomb.
Right.
This year, for whatever reason, they did not invite the Israeli ambassador. In response, the ambassadors of the US, France, the UK, Canada, and Germany all declined to attend this memorial of innocent people attacked by a nuclear bomb. And Japan's eyes have now opened as well on this topic. And I see protests in Japan about this. To not honor the victims of Nagasaki is a huge insult. And it just shows you how powerful Israel is,
Yes.
and its control over the West. It's really sad and ridiculous. It's really sad and ridiculous, and quite damaging for everyone involved, everyone equally.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I
Well, not
mean, and
equally. No, no,
no,
no.
not equally.
Us way more than you. Way, way, way more.
Yeah. What do
Yeah.
you think? Do you think that there's any hope that the United States will shift gears
No.
and step in and stop Israel? I mean, is there anything that Israel can do that the United States would say, okay, that's our red line?
Um, that will well, how would that happen? You'd have to have someone who is either so charismatic that whatever he wants to do will be anointed by the people to the point where they will not listen to the media that is, of course, instructed to like just prop up Israel.
Yeah.
You have to have someone of extreme charisma who is willing to do that. Or, and this is the more interesting option, you change the system so that defense contractors and lobbyists don't have as much sway, because I'm sure that this tragedy is just one in a string of tragedies resulting from a suboptimal alignment of the defense industry in the US and
Yeah.
private special interest groups. But I don't want to zoom it out because that makes it seem fatalistic and just, nothing you can do about it. You can certainly do things about it. And but it has to. The U.S. is just part of it. I think if the U.S. stops sending arms to Israel, Germany will step in right away.
Oh, really? You think so?
Oh, I certainly do. I certainly do. I certainly do. I think Germany. I think still supports Israel very much. Like, it took like 7 months of slaughter for like a negative comment from the German chancellor. 7 months of slaughter, I think. Spain, Ireland, and Norway, meanwhile, stuck to their principles and justly recognized the Palestinian state. Canada, which is supposed to be the woke version of America, still doesn't recognize a Palestinian state. There was an incident of a lady who wanted to renew her Canadian passport. On the old one, it said Palestine, country of origin. On the new one, they didn't know what to do because they no longer recognized it. So you know what I mean? Like the scope is immense, which is why I think which is why I think China coming over and rising and becoming more influential in the world will balance this out and hopefully reduce the influence of the West on the affairs of the Middle East, and with that the influence of the West, with that the power that Israel is able to wield in the area. I really strongly believe that if Israel was no longer cut a blank check and it had finite resources, it would invest those in good relations with its neighbors
Yeah.
instead of just endless war. Because if you have endless resources, you're gonna have endless ambitions. If you're a racist, those will be racist ambitions. So it's just a matter of that, I think.
So speaking of China, what inspired you to write A Tale of Rice Copper? And how did your research into China-Pakistan's economic corridor evolve over time? And let's put your book
Thank you.
cover up too.
Yes, thank you very much. I also have a page on Facebook called Geopolitics with Toufic. For anyone who'd like to see my other interviews and articles on this topic. China was a point of fascination for me when I started studying in Japan, because I've studied international development. China is touted as a breakthrough model of international development because it lifted 300 million of its people out of poverty
Yeah.
through a liberalization of its economic system. As you know, it was quite staunchly communist. And then in the 1980s, reforms implemented by Deng Xiaoping saw it become more attuned to the commerce of the world and the trading and with the world and capitalism and so on and so forth. And now China is soaring, and it has ambition as well. And my research on China has evolved over time because I've also studied sociology. So culture, I think, is a very important part of what's going on. Disdain with the West is fertile ground for China and Russia. Disdain for China and Russia is fertile ground for the West. Right now, in the Middle East, it's becoming more and more fertile for China and Russia to come in. Pakistan is no exception. A Pew Research poll taken in the 2010s after the assassination of Osama bin Laden found that over 80% of Pakistanis had an unfavorable view of the US. The Belt and Road Initiative launches in 2013. Pakistan is one of the first to sign on. Prior to this, their relations were fine, but America always had the upper hand because of its advanced military capabilities and because it wanted to have an edge in. It also had the war on terror going on, so it needed to have Pakistan firmly by its side to observe Afghanistan and so on. Then after war on terror ended, America kind of just left. I didn't really care about Pakistan that much anymore. To be sure, to be certain, humanitarian aid kept coming from America, but China offered development aid. These are very different things. And development funding. It had projects to alleviate Pakistan's electrical grid, its export capabilities, its agricultural output. The relationship between the two is quite interesting in that China's kind of upgrading Pakistan in every possible way, but it's also making it more subservient to China at the same time. It's like, I will power you up and you will be very, very good to me. In the book, I discuss how, for example, after China invested in improving Pakistan's roads and its access to energy, copper exports from Pakistan skyrocketed to China. Copper is a very important part of China's renewable energy industry, such as solar panels.
Right.
Just a tip for your followers, China controls over 80% of the world's solar value chain. The International Energy Agency says this is a red flag. So if China gets sick, we all have less solar energy. So because of its growing, technological cloud, it needs copper more than ever. And it found some copper in Pakistan, and it found a way to get a new source of copper. Rice is another one. Pakistani rice is usually long grain, indica rice, but China has, through the Belt and Road, invested in several agricultural projects such that today China is the number one destination of Pakistan's rice exports, has been for the past 5 years in a row. And Pakistan's exports to China are not really the rice that it consumes. It's the rice that China consumes, which is the japonica rice, the smaller, more glutinous rice that you can eat with chopsticks more easily. So China kind of is turning Pakistan into a breadbasket so that it can free up its own farmers to pursue more advanced vocations, which make more money, basically. Its farmers will be upgraded to computer scientists and engineers, whereas Pakistani farmers will just make more of the same, but what China wants, essentially. So it's a kind of subjugation of Pakistan. But farmers are pretty happy about this in Pakistan. They have a new source of export. They have more advanced machinery because China has furnished them with cheaper imports of machinery that helps refine the rice and pick out the good ones sort out the good ones from the bad ones. Lots of things we can talk about, but yes, this is the gist of it, is that it is improving Pakistan, but it's making it more susceptible to China's whims.
Well, let me ask you this. Can you explain how China's Belt and Road Initiative differs from previous forms of Western imperialism and developmental aid?
Sure. My goodness, they're quite different, I think. Well, actually, if you mentioned that, after World War II, Southern Europe was in need of investment. The North was in shambles. The US steps in. This is not the Marshall Plan, by the way. This is different. the US steps in and it conditions it says, okay, Greece, Italy, we will help you out. We will invest in you. We will send you our imports on the condition that what we give you, you used to buy American products.
Right.
So Greece and Italy were kind of subjugated in that way to American hegemony. Right now, a lot of the developing world is in need of infrastructure investment. In Asia alone, I think the number is about $2 trillion is necessary for infrastructure investment. The Belt and Road Initiative accounts for a significant chunk of that, especially in poorer developing states such as Pakistan. It's not, I think, imperialistic because so far the Chinese army has not been a major part of it. It's largely been commercial. It's largely been based on infrastructure. China's not holding a gun to anyone and being like, okay, do this or else. No, it's saying we have objectively cheaper imports of the same thing you're getting from Europe and Japan. So you will buy it. And people will buy it. So it's not really coercive. It's just market logic. This is where the whole hegemony idea comes in, because part of hegemony is being able to export a product that is in high demand at a price that is competitive and a quality that is equal to or superior than the competition. And this is what China has in the form of its solar panels, in the form of other technologies that Pakistan particularly requires. Where it gets problematic is the contracts. China. So here's some numbers for you. Chinese loans through the Belt and Road Initiative. This is actually based on a study by the College of William and Mary. If you want to go check that out, Chinese loans per the Belt and Road Initiative and financing have a shorter grace period and a higher rate of interest than loans from the World Bank and the OECD. OECD being basically the West, right. Japan, the US, etc. So the OECD and the World Bank have a longer grace period and a lower interest rate when it comes to their loans. However, they're a lot more prudent about who they loan. Pakistan has defaulted multiple times on its loans, so it wouldn't make sense for the World Bank to keep lending it. China, however, structured its loans such that it would get significant benefits from the state if these loans were not repaid. So, for example, one of the main projects of the Belt and Road Initiative is building the port of Gwadar. Gwadar is a port along the Arab Gulf. It will serve as a great launching pad for Chinese exports to the Arab Gulf and Europe. It's going to be a game changer for the area. But China will own over 90% of the port's profits once complete.
Okay.
So there's that. Yes, we're building you brand new things, but we're going to take advantage of most of it. You know what I mean? Yeah, there's that. And also, it could be just as problematic as imperialism when you think about India. China and India are beefing. Well, India's not beefing. It cannot beef. Pakistan and India also don't like each other. So China and Pakistan naturally forged this alliance against India. And India doesn't like it one bit. So there's also a military element to the Belt and Road Initiative in that China and Pakistan are undergoing military exercises together. Pakistan is importing Chinese military equipment. The GPS system that is US-based has been replaced in Pakistan by the Chinese tracking system called Beidou. China is also training the next generation of Pakistan's army. The US still has an advantage in advanced military technology. So Pakistan doesn't want to lose the US altogether, but China's really moved in the military part. And most problematically, I think, it has facilitated the distribution of Pakistan's army across Pakistan. They're even in regions which are supposed to be autonomous, such as the region of Balochistan, where Gwadar Port is located. The Balochis historically have been against Islamabad's rule because it sees that the state is not justly redistributing the wealth of the region. Balochistan is rich in minerals and metals and other resources. It sees that the Pakistani state just takes it, does not give back. And so many attacks on Chinese projects in Pakistan have been from Balochis due to this perceived dynamic. And this is where the Chinese military comes in, because it's training personnel to counter these moves. And also the Chinese Navy is docked around Gwadar. And the Gwadar port has also been seen as capable of hosting or of satisfying militaristic ends. It's a versatile port in that regard.
Interesting. Why do you think the United States has been either unwilling or unable to match China's level of investment in countries like Pakistan?
Well, you can't blame it much because, as I said, Pakistan has defaulted on its loans multiple times. So it wouldn't, Pakistan's not Israel. It has to be accountable for U.S. funds. Yeah, so when it comes to non-Israeli states, you have to be logical and prudent with who you fund. The other reason is, as I said, Pakistan is not that important as it used to be, because the war on terror in that region, at least, is a new chapter, shall we say, because of the Taliban, and no more bin Laden. That's what they really wanted to be in the first place. It's just no more bin Laden. Taliban is there. Okay, we don't really care. As long as there's no more bin Laden, that's it. That's the beef we had. Second, the U.S. is outclassed geographically in that regard. China is right next to Pakistan. They're neighbors. So it only makes sense that their ties will grow closer together. Interestingly, however, the U.S. remains Pakistan's largest export destination by far. So even though Pakistan imports the most from China, it exports the most to the U.S.
Really?
U.S. Products don't really.
Really? That's
Did you say
fascinating.
something?
Oh, I was just commenting.
Yes. Yes. Pakistan exports a lot of the suits that you wear and other, garment material. Garments in Pakistan are a very strong industry. And so that's what the U.S., has demand for. U.S., however, Pakistan does not have that much demand for U.S. products, because if they're technological, either they're too advanced and expensive, or China can make the same thing but cheaper. So the U.S. is totally outclassed when it comes to technological exports, and these are what generates the most trade revenue. As you know, the U.S. runs a trade deficit. It imports more than it exports, and it's able to compensate for this by just printing money and whatever. China, meanwhile, is always in a trade surplus. It exports way more than it imports. And a result of that is that it has now sway over these countries that are in the Belt and Road. The Belt and Road is meant to streamline trade between China and the developing world, so that China can acquire agriculture products and raw material with which it needs to sustain its growth, and have markets for its technological exports at the same time, and other exports that may not be technological, but it's just facilitating its ascent, so to speak. The Belt and Road is absolutely vital for China. Some people have said that the coronavirus happened to kind of derail the Belt and Road. When you're growing, you need fuel to keep growing. Otherwise, you either stay stagnant or you just Japanify, if you will, because Japan also had a meteoric rise of the 80s that it could not sustain, and the real estate market popped there, if you recall. So China doesn't want the same thing happening to it. And I think that the Belt and Road is its kind of insurance policy on its growth.
Interesting. How has China managed to implement what I guess we'll call soft power in Pakistan, especially with like media partnerships and language courses that have kind of strengthened its
Yes.
influence.
Yes, so Mandarin has become way more popular in Pakistan than ever before. It's being taught all over the place, not just in the major cities, but also in the towns. It's being taught not only to like young students, but also to working age employees, also being taught in the military and by the military.
Really?
A Senate resolution passed in Pakistan. Yes. Um, it's because China's the new big superpower there. They want to like encourage people to learn it. It's now mandatory in many of Pakistan's elementary schools to learn Mandarin. That's how big it's gotten. Um, Furthermore, the Pakistani Senate passed a resolution recently that highlighted or that acknowledged the need to facilitate Mandarin language training, at least for the personnel who are working on Belt and Road Initiative projects. And these are going to be quite a few because they're across the country and they're going to be for like several years to come. What's more interesting is that these are tied to China's educational opportunities and employment opportunities that it provides to Pakistanis. Um, as you know, many Pakistanis go to the UK, the US to study abroad.
Right.
China has furnished a lot of generous scholarships for Pakistanis. Universities in China are cheaper, first of all. Um, Second, some Pakistanis who go to China have reportedly not faced the same amount of racism that they may have faced in other countries, including the UK and maybe the US.
Yes. Definitely.
However, as part of those scholarship programs, require that students learn about Chinese culture and history and language. So when they return from these universities, ready to become bridges between Pakistan and China, they become a counterweight to those elites who have studied in Western universities. So they become the voices against, closer ties to the West and against Western values. You know what I mean? Even though China is more liberal than Pakistan, it's not liberal on everything.
Right.
Uh, you know what I mean? So it kind of derails liberalization, I think, because it no longer creates an impetus to do so. It's no longer cool, you know what I mean, to be westernized, so to speak, because there's an alternative now that you can follow. However, well, in addition, media. There was a movie out recently in Pakistan that portrayed a Chinese heroine and a Pakistani hero, um, lead actors. They go on a trip and they fall in love, and their families don't approve of it, but they overcome it and they get married. So China is very, very, very cognizant of the cultural firepower that the West wields. The West had the 80s. The West had the 80s. We all know like 80s English songs. They're popular all over the world. China never had that moment. It lost out on the big, I think, 80s boom, because it just didn't have the capacity to make itself that popular. Now it's pushing hard to make itself more popular, and it's translating. It's setting up branches of Xinhua and other media outlets in Pakistan. It's working on translating its content into Urdu, which is a main Pakistani language. It's also concluded several memorandums of understanding with Pakistani news outlets, so to train journalists in China to cover news about China in a way that is flattering to China, and to
Right.
counter what they call misinformation about the Belt and Road Initiative. So if anything, so if someone says, "Oh, the Belt and Road Initiative is not going to employ that many Pakistanis," the journalists would just like go all Sean Hannity on it and be like, "No, we're employing many people, and those who say that's not the case are enemies of Pakistan." You know what I mean? So
Right.
there's that going on. I'm sure it's all kinds of problematic on so many levels, but at the end of the day, they're providing something the West is not, namely investment, job opportunities, and development.
In what ways has China's economic influence in Pakistan impacted the broader BRICS alliance and China's global standing in itself?
Well, just to highlight to your viewers what this economic relationship is like. China and Pakistan's trade China has a trade surplus with Pakistan that has grown over the years because, as I said, it has invested heavily into agriculture, all the while exporting technological products to Pakistan. So you're basically trading rice for solar panels. You're going to have a massive trade surplus. That has translated into what I call what world systems analysis, my main framework, calls financial dominance, whereby Pakistan's stock exchange is 40% owned by China now, and it has the power to appoint its director. So it's that powerful now in Pakistan. It also facilitated a purchase of Russian oil concluded in the Chinese yuan instead of the US dollar. Now,
Right.
now about Pakistan and the BRICS, well, India obviously is the main thing to look out for in that regard. I don't think Pakistan will be joining the BRICS anytime soon. That may be India's red line. China has more to lose if India leaves BRICS than with India there, because India is, first of all, is a huge Asian superpower. Second, India can be a counterweight to the West if it stays with the BRICS. That's why India is benefiting so much from what's happening right now. It's getting cheap Russian oil. It's also not getting heavily condemned in the West, despite its assassinations there, because there have been a few, particularly against the Sikh community. You know what I mean? So China does not want to lose India. I don't think Pakistan will be joining BRICS. India is not happy with the alliance of China and Pakistan, particularly because of the military exercises that have been happening dangerously close to Kashmir, which is disputed, and also the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI segment that runs through China, that runs through Pakistan, called the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, clips the tip of Kashmir, effectively acknowledging that this area, at least, is Pakistani in China's views. So India's, on the edge, I think. It's against expanding. It was against expanding before the BRICS. It may be against expanding now. Russia, of course, is totally opposite. It wants to expand as much as possible.
Right.
It is bitter with vengeance against the West, for better or for worse. And so, yeah, I argue that India actually is the main thing that keeps the BRICS from expanding further. It's the main pull. It's, I think, the main Western counterweight in the BRICS, because it does not want a stronger China on its borders. And it's interesting, like China, Russia, and India have such an interesting and fascinating relationship. China and Russia love each other. India and Russia love each other. India and China detest each other. It's it's like having two husbands or two wives. It's quite funny. But yeah, that's the dynamic. Brazil and South Africa are just sick to their teeth of Western exceptionalism. Particularly South Africa has been, as you've seen, very active and vocal when it comes to Israel. Brazil, with Lula in power, has also been, actively vocal against the United States, especially after years of Bolsonaro.
Yeah.
And they all hate trading in the dollar because it forces them to go in these loops and jump through hoops, and all to the benefit of the US. So they do want their currencies to be more respected and used. And Saudi Arabia recently annulled an agreement to stop selling oil exclusively in
Yes.
the
The
US
petrodollar.
dollar.
Yes.
Yes. So it's not only India and Pakistan and the BRICS that are benefiting from China's emergence and Russia's anger. I just want to make it clear that if it wasn't for Russia, China would not be as bold as it is now. Because
Really?
Vladimir Putin is in Russia. Yes, I truly think so. The main, if you're against what's happening in regards to China's growing power, the main villain is not China. It is Putin. Putin, I think, is the guy propping up China, encouraging it to do more things, because he really wants Europe and the US to reel from these sanctions that they've slapped him with, because he brazenly feels like he's a Zionist for Ukraine, shall we say. Like, he brazenly, unapologetically thinks that Ukraine should be part of Russia, which is just as absurd as saying that, you know, all of Palestine should be just given to the Jews. It's the same thing. It's ridiculous. It's unreasonable. You know, ask the people there what they want.
Right.
Same thing for Taiwan. Leave Taiwan alone. You know, China. I mean, I admire many things about what China has done, and I admire Russia for many things it has done. But Ukraine and Taiwan are absolutely, you know, they just burn any kind of admiration I had for them. Just leave those two states alone. You know what I mean? Ukraine is free to join NATO if it wants to. It's none of your business. It's its own state. Stick to your borders. You know what I mean?
Well, isn't part of the problem, though, that Russia does not want NATO expanding up to its borders? I mean, isn't that a reasonable concern?
I think the West is way more scared of Russia than it is of the West. The NATO has expanded to Estonia, to the Baltics, basically, in the 90s. And there has been no attack on Russia in this time. I don't think that Ukraine joining NATO would have done anything substantial. It would just have meant that the issue of Crimea would have had to be solved faster. Because if NATO joins Russia, if Ukraine joins Russia today, it will automatically trigger the article of collective response,
right?
Because Crimea is effectively under Russian occupation, and so now is the Donbass in Ukraine's east. But I do think that this was a hasty move on Putin's side, totally unnecessary, because, I mean, it's ridiculous. Oh, what does Russia need? What don't we have? Oh, that's right, more land. No, Russia, you have the most land of anyone. That's not the answer to your problems. The answer to your problems is less corruption, more meritocracy, more liberalism, and just be nice, damn it. You know, but the U.S., of course, is not an innocent player in this either.
Right.
So it's hard to criticize any state these days. They all have their skeletons in the closet. But I think the one thing you cannot criticize is Palestinians.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, they've been victims for over 50 years, and I mean,
they really have, and it really is a tragedy what's happened. I mean, what can we say? You know, the words cannot put into perspective. What I really hate is how celebrities in the U.S. have not been more vocal about this.
Oh, I know. I know.
Like, all these gangster rappers that come from the worst hoods of the U.S., and Macklemore is the most vocal artist about this. You know, a white guy from Seattle. Like, where's 50 Cent? Where's Eminem? Where's Nicki Minaj? Where's all these, like, hard guys who are supposed to have, like, street credibility, and they hate the police and they hate the system? Like, where are you? Eminem is completely silent on this. I'm disgusted. Like, I'm disgusted with so many celebrities nowadays. When I see any kind of VMA award show, whatever, these are all distractions. They're all distractions. These celebrities don't care about you. If you're a Palestinian, they wouldn't care about you. You could be their diehard fan for the longest time. They will not say anything in your defense, because if they do so, it is a net loss to their revenue. And that is disgusting. It is spineless. Beyonce has been silent. I'm disgusted by her. Lady Gaga has been silent. I'm disgusted by her. I no longer pay to buy any music from any American artist except Macklemore. And well, I'm sure quite a few other people have said something, but he's the most popular. But shout out to The Weeknd, who donated $2 million to the UN's efforts to relieve hunger in Palestine. So shout out to him as well.
Well, a lot of it, too, is these artists are afraid of being smeared as anti-Semitic.
Well, I think it's just plain cowardice. If they have a platform to justify themselves, then they can do so. I think the fact that they're scared makes them less artistic, so to speak. And also because it means that what they're producing has to follow a formula. But how can that be free expression if that's the case? That's not to say that art should, like, encourage profanity, or not profanity, that art should encourage racism, but it should at the very least expose injustice. And drag queens also have been extremely disappointing in this regard. You think of them as these like rebels who are whatever, you know what I mean? Like also against the system, but in the queer community.
Yeah.
And very few of them have been vocal about this. They're still doing their stupid podcasts and they're still doing their stupid shows without a word about what's going on. But I do want to give a shout out to Shea Coulee, who won All Stars 9 and who I totally respect now. Shea Coulee changed her Twitter handle to ceasefire now. Like that's how much I respect this person. So shout out to Shea Coulee.
Well, we need a lot more than a ceasefire. We need to end the occupation.
But see, it's hard to do so. Like, what does that even mean? Does that mean that they all pack their bags and leave? A lot of them don't speak English. They don't. A lot of them don't speak the language that of their parents and grandparents. Because let me just remind people, they all came here from Europe. Okay, very few of them came from Ethiopia, but most of them came from Europe on ships, and they docked, and we lived in relative harmony for quite a few years. And we even had some of them in our homes. And suddenly, the militias emerged that were being like, "Oh, we should have all this land for ourselves, and the U.S. and Germany will support us. So let's just do it." So if you look up the history, it's a dirty, disgusting history. So what does end the occupation mean? Does it mean that suddenly the entire area becomes Israel and every Palestinian becomes an Israeli citizen? They won't let that happen because there's so much rage there. You can't have, you know what I mean? The Rwandan genocide, though, offers some hope because they were able to have transitional justice in a relatively admirable fashion, and now they're a prosperous nation. But the more Netanyahu, throws dirt on this with every massacre that he commits, the farther we are from ever thinking about peace ever again. Like, it's just what's happening now is it's never been this bad. It's never been this continued. It's never been this exposed, really. A lot of people have never seen this. You know what I mean? Thanks to social media, they're seeing this for the first time. Americans are talking about it and not getting canceled because there's too many of them talking about it. You can't cancel everyone, even though they're taking steps like making Zionists a protected group of people.
I know.
Like, it's ridiculous because Zionism is the way you think. It's not an ethnicity or a race. It's just these are like tired, sloppy, top-down measures that are oppressive in their very nature, and they're not sustainable because they're top-down. And I'm sure that the double-edged sword of somebody's not talking about this is that they're not supporting it either. You know what I mean? Like, I haven't seen Eminem being like, "Oh, I'm with Israel," attack those Palestinians. Meanwhile, Jordan Peterson, oh my goodness, what an awful man. The first thing he said after October 7th was like, "Oh, give him hell," with a stupid, tired voice and a stupid suit that has like these patterns of, "Oh, the world is strange, but it's all about your relationship with your parents." Shut up, Jordan. God. And Elon Musk as well is also in the mix, and Trump, and blah 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 blah. And people here in Lebanon, we're thinking, who is better for us, Trump or Kamala? Who we don't know. Like, some people say, "Oh, I think Trump will make the Middle East better because well, he wants investments here, and his son wants like investments and real estate here." And I'm like, well, Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem, which pissed everybody off. How on earth is it conducive to peace? The Iranians, the word on the street in Lebanon is that the Iranians secretly would like Trump to win because A, he would not run the country properly. It would facilitate its decline. B, Trump would finalize things. He'd either say, "Okay, to war completely, let's end this now," or we end this completely, don't do anything again. That's what they think. Kamala, meanwhile, will just like put balm on a massive whale of a bruise. She'll just like, she'll have to continue without taking substantial action. because it'll be her first term and she has to be nice and play by the rules. Otherwise, she'll be voted out by an APAC propped up puppet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not optimistic. Though for me, for the sake of America, I do hope Kamala wins because I do think that she will offer some relief to Americans, economic relief, and more workers' rights. And I do think that if Americans are more economically well off and have more time to think, then they'll make wiser political choices and vote for people with more integrity
Well,
and
God,
change their
one
political
would certainly
agreements.
hope.
Yeah, I think so. Like I think if Americans have more time to think and are not like kidnapped by the circuses of Nicki Minaj and the Kardashians, then they might make well, education really is at the heart of all this, right? Education and where you get your information from. And I think if she continues with this student debt relief thing, then and if universities maintain like a kind of liberal, worldview, then it will be good for the long term. But she will be, I think, inept in the short term. Certainly so. I think so. Like I'm not
Yeah,
optimistic, but yeah.
I'm not optimistic either. I mean, I'm having a hard time. I don't know that I can vote for either of them. To be quite honest with you, I definitely couldn't vote for Trump. But Kamala is just. I've got major issues with her, especially regarding the Israel conflict. I mean, she's not going to be a departure whatsoever. I mean, Alicia's calling for a ceasefire, but she's not willing to put any effort into acquiring that.
Yeah, well, many Muslims in the US are saying that they cannot vote for Democrats because of Biden.
Yeah.
And they want to show the US that the Arab vote matters by having Trump win, which I think is irrational because it's like saying, "Oh, I'm tough. Here, shoot me."
Right.
You know what I mean? That's exactly the mentality. You don't want to be shot. You know what I mean? You can prove you're tough in other, more safer ways. At least safer for all of us here.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we both know that Jill Stein's not gonna, clip through.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I wish she would. Like, I wish the whole idea that, oh, if why should I do it? Nobody else will. I hope that one day everyone wakes up and be like, okay, you know what? If I do it, everyone else will. You know what I mean? I hope that's replaced and Jill Stein gets at the top somehow. But even if she does, it's really Congress and the Supreme Court, and it's just it's festering all over the place. But I do think, because we're not being conspiratorial here, I'm not going to say things like, "Oh, Jews control the world." That's ridiculous. Or the Palestine thing is a religion thing. I think that's ridiculous. I think fundamentally it is about money. It is about. I think it's about money. And I think at some point, someone's going to say, okay, this is no longer that feasible. Like, why are we doing this? Because on the Republican side, you have the fiscal conservatives who are against sending aid to Ukraine, but have to be on board with Israel. But I've seen some people who I don't really like, but a broken clock is right twice a day. Tucker Carlson had a person on who exposed AIPAC. Candace Owens has been vocally critical of Israel. So I'm very happy with her. And then she goes on Don Lemon and is like, "Oh yes, you're a sinner because you're homosexual." I'm like, ugh, God, I was so close to liking you. Like, you're a black woman in media. I was so close to loving you. But hey, I mean, she keeps hammering that point through, and it's created a rift in the right wing, I think, between those who are actually principled and those who are just paid and don't really believe what they are supposed to be doing. So I think it's very interesting to see what's going to happen. I don't know if Candace Owens still endorses Trump, by the way. I'm not sure that's on the table. But yeah, at least people who are conservative now are opening up to the idea of, okay, why? It's not anti-Semitic to not fund Israel. It's just fiscally responsible. You know what I mean? So that attitude, I think, will amplify, hopefully, especially at a time when China is growing stronger and the U.S. deficit is growing bigger and bigger. It's going to stop eventually. Or else Israel is going to just burn the U.S. down with it, and with it the whole Western-led order, because if the ICC and the ICJ rulings are not respected, no country will behave ever again. And I predict,
right.
and I predict, yes, and I predict that the BRICS bloc will eventually create their own ICJ that they all agree on, and developing countries will look to them for justice and for decisiveness on certain issues. I do think that will come because they already have banks. The BRICS have a bank called the New Development Bank, and they loan without any conditions, or at least without the same conditions that the Western order does, for better or for worse, by the way. This is all no value judgment, but it's just the physics of the situation. Like, it's a ticking time bomb. It's ridiculous.
Do you see there's being a possibility of there being a World War III breaking out because of the Middle East right now?
It's not really in anyone's economic benefit to do so in the short term, but you have Russia and Ukraine, you have China and Taiwan, you have Venezuela threatening Guyana, you have obviously Israel-Palestine happening as well. I think in some ways we already are in World War III. It's just not like propped up. You know what I mean? The US does have military operations going on. So does China. So does Russia. All these other actors could arguably be just tentacles of the superpowers. The Houthis could just be Russia's Yemeni bloc via Iran, which also makes it China's Yemeni bloc. So I think that the last few wars that have happened have kind of taught actors to be more versatile and resourceful and not declare war as states, because that's just not popular to do. You hire mercenaries and they do the work for you, or you just engage in economic terrorism, which is what the US has done to many countries. China is, by the way, is not morally higher than the US in this regard. I think it would do similar things, if not worse. I'm not that optimistic. I'm only optimistic about them balancing each other out and letting the middle states pick the best deal. That, I think, is something to look forward to if the middle states are governed properly. So Brazil, South Africa, if they stay out of corruption, they stand to benefit. I don't know what's going to happen to Lebanon. We're resilient, yes, but hey, I mean, if you blow up our pagers, we might die. You have to laugh about this because there's no more tears to shed. And if you laugh at something, you conquer it. So I have a big sense of humor about this. Not that something should be laughed about, like children getting killed or whatever.
Right.
But some things you have to take with some laughter to just go through it. Yes.
Yes. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. We're almost out of time, and I wanted to just go ahead and give you an opportunity to talk more about your book. And I want to let my audience know that I have not read the book yet. I do intend to read the book when it comes out. When does it come out, by the way?
It came out August 8th.
Oh, August 8th. Oh, I wish I would have known that. I would have read it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't put it in the email, but yeah, it is out. It's out and proud.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, this was a great conversation.
I've had a great time talking to you. Well, I always have a great time talking to you. I'm a huge fan of yours.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm honored to hear that.
Yeah. So I wanted to give you just kind of the last word. If there's anything that we didn't talk about that you would have liked to brought up, or talk more about your book.
Well, the book explores the China-Pakistan relationship under the Belt and Road Initiative. And it comes, the conclusion is I'm not going to spoil the conclusion, but I go through economic relations. I look at trade. I look at cultural exchanges, military cooperation. My framework is called World Systems Analysis, which sees the world as one interconnected world market of labor rather than these separate states. And so the Belt and Road really meshes with that well, because it intends to create a unified value chain for China in the same way. So if you're interested in geopolitics, interested in international relations theory, interested in China, the Middle East, Pakistan, even India. I think you'd have a great time writing it. It's not that technical, and some excerpts have been published by other outlets and articles that I've written that you can find on my Facebook page and my LinkedIn page and my academia.org page.
And we'll have all of those hopefully down in the bottom of the description for people as well.
For sure.
I believe we have those. If not, I'll get them from you.
Sure.
Thank you so much for this conversation. I really enjoyed it. And I hope that we'll have you back on the show to talk further about these developments. Hopefully developments will improve.
Excuse me, groove?
Improve. Hopefully developments will improve, but it's not looking optimistic.
I mean, it can't get any worse than it's gotten, but
well,
we'll see what happens. Hopefully the response will be decisive.
Yes.
We'll see what happens.
Thank you so much, and definitely have you back. And for everyone else, we are off next week. We will see you the week after. And this has been Coup Save America. Everybody,